I thought the hardest part was choosing her. I was wrong. The hardest part was learning why someone else wanted her back. The phone call came 3 days after I brought Bella home. A man's voice, tight with controlled anger. "That dog is mine. Return her, or I'll sue you for everything you have." I almost laughed. Another shelter scam, I thought. Someone trying to claim a rescue dog for ransom or revenge. Then the shelter called back, frantic, begging me not to answer his calls again. That's when I understood. Bella wasn't just a rescue. She was evidence. The shelter hallway carried that peculiar mixture of bleach and hope that all such places share. Dogs barked from every kennel, bodies pressed against chain link, tails wagging desperately. Each one performing the ancient ritual. Pick me. Love me. Save me. Every dog except one. Bella sat on an orthopedic bed near the back wall, black and white coat immaculate, ears at attention. She didn't beg, didn't bark. She simply watched me with the kind of assessment that comes from hard-earned wisdom, the knowledge that not everyone who smiles can be trusted. I'm Martins. I am 51 years old. I grew up when dogs lived outside, ate leftovers, and died old in the yards they protected their whole lives. No prescription anxiety pills. No memory foam beds shipped overnight. Just loyalty, work, and an understanding that required no words. Bella reminded me of those dogs. But something was different. She was too still. When the volunteer unlocked her kennel, Bella rose slowly, deliberately, as though movement required careful calculation. No wagging tail. No excitement. Just quiet compliance. "She's real calm," the volunteer offered, clipping a leash to her collar. "Gentle. Been here for about 2 weeks. 2 weeks is nothing in shelter time. Photogenic puppies disappear in days." Bella was 4 years old. A shepherd mix, utterly ordinary to anyone scrolling adoption photos on their phone during lunch breaks. But to me, she looked like the dogs I remembered. Steady, intelligent, the kind who didn't need theatrics to prove their value. I'd already prepared everything. Crate for the truck, raised feeding bowls, calming supplements recommended by an online vet, an expensive orthopedic bed with cooling gel positioned by the window at home, because older dogs deserve comfort. Everything was ready. The paperwork took under 20 minutes. The volunteer's smile was too bright. The manager barely glanced at the file. I should have felt joy, relief, and pride. Instead, unease coiled in my chest. Bella walked beside me through the lobby, past the bulletin board plastered with happy adoption photos, past the donation jar stuffed with crumpled bills. She moved like someone who'd traveled this path before. Not eagerly, not reluctantly, just practiced. We stepped into the cold afternoon air, and she stopped. Not dramatically. She simply sat on the concrete 3 feet from my truck and turned her head back toward the glass doors. Her eyes held no panic, no confusion, only resignation. I've witnessed fear in dogs, excitement, aggression, bewilderment. But resignation is something else entirely. Resignation is learned. "Come on, girl," I murmured, applying the gentlest pressure to the leash. Nothing. I crouched beside her and saw it then, the too controlled breathing. Pupils dilated despite the overcast sky. A faint tremor in her front legs. This wasn't a dog afraid of leaving. This was a dog who'd been taught that leaving meant something worse than staying. When I ran my hand along her back, she leaned into the touch, barely, wanting comfort but unable to trust it. Her coat was immaculate, recently brushed, nails trimmed, no matting, no parasites. She hadn't been neglected. She'd been maintained. Behind me, the shelter door opened. The volunteer appeared, car keys jangling. "Everything okay?" I studied Bella, then the volunteer, then the building looming behind her. "Yeah," I said slowly. Everything's fine. But it wasn't. I'd spent 30 years reading people, and I recognized the signs. Paperwork rushed through, behavioral notes conspicuously absent, Bella's medical file listing prescription anxiety medication with no explanation of cause. I lifted Bella gently into the truck. She curled into the crate without resistance, resting her chin on the folded fleece blanket. I closed the door, started the engine, and pulled away. Bella didn't look back. She didn't look forward to it either. She simply closed her eyes. I drove home with a knot of dread that refused to loosen. That feeling, that certainty that something was profoundly wrong was only the beginning. Because 3 days later, my phone rang, and the voice on the other end spoke 5 words that would alter everything. That dog belongs to me. Before we get into what happened when that breeder showed up at my door, quick question. If someone threatened to sue you over a rescue dog, would you fight back or give in? Drop your answer in the comments and tell me where you're watching from, because we're racing to 1,000 subscribers and I need to know who's got my back when things get legal. Hit that subscribe button if you think dogs deserve protection over profit. Let's go. The drive home should have been peaceful. I'd imagined it 100 times over the past 3 months. Windows cracked, radio low, Bella's head resting near the crate door as we drove through town toward the quiet street where I'd lived alone for the past 6 years. I'd pictured her first steps into the house, the way she'd sniff the corners, inspect the rooms, maybe curl up on that memory foam orthopedic bed I'd set by the window. But Bella didn't rest her head near the crate door. She lay flat on her side, eyes open, staring at nothing. I glanced back at her through the rearview mirror every few minutes, waiting for some sign of curiosity. A lifted ear, a shift in position, something. Dogs are supposed to be alert in new environments. Anxious, maybe. Excited, hopefully. But Bella was neither. She was absent. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the knot in my chest had tightened into something I couldn't ignore. I opened the crate door slowly, half expecting her to bolt or hesitate. Instead, she rose smoothly and stepped out onto the gravel like she'd done this before. Like she'd been delivered to unfamiliar driveways more times than I wanted to consider. "Welcome home, girl," I said quietly. She looked at me, then at the house, then back at me. No tail wag, no interest, just acknowledgement. Inside, I'd prepared everything. The raised stainless steel feeding bowls sat filled with premium dry food mixed with a little warm water, the way older dogs prefer it. The orthopedic bed was positioned perfectly by the living room window where the afternoon light came in soft and golden. I'd even set out her calming supplements, the vet-recommended kind with chamomile extract, on the counter next to a bottle of the prescription anxiety medication listed in her file. Bella walked through each room slowly, methodically, like she was cataloging exits. When she reached the bed by the window, she sniffed it once, circled twice, and lay down with her back to the glass. Not facing the sunlight, not watching the street, facing inwardly, toward the door, like she was guarding against something, or waiting for someone. I sat on the couch across from her, watching her breathe. Controlled, measured, the kind of breathing you learn when panic isn't allowed. "You're safe here," I told her. Her ear flicked. That was all. The first night, Bella didn't sleep. I know because I didn't either. I'd set up a dog crate in my bedroom, one of those heavy-duty wire ones with the padded mat inside and a blanket draped over the top to make it den-like and secure. I left the door open. She could go in or stay out. Her choice. She went in. But she didn't lie down. She sat, upright, staring at my bedroom door for hours. Around 2 in the morning, I got up to use the bathroom, and when I came back, she was in the exact same position. Still staring. Still waiting. "Bella," I whispered. "Lie down." It's okay. She blinked. Once. Didn't move. I'd raised dogs before. Farm dogs, mostly. Mutts that lived outside and earned their keep. They slept hard after a long day. They trusted easily because life was simple: food, work, affection, repeat. But Bella didn't trust easily, and I was starting to understand why. She'd been trained not to. Day 2 was quieter, but not better. I took her for a walk through the neighborhood, keeping the leash loose, letting her set the pace. She walked beside me like a soldier on patrol, head up, ears forward, scanning. When another dog barked from behind a fence, she didn't react. When a car passed too close, she didn't flinch. She'd been desensitized. That night, I gave her the first dose of her prescribed anxiety medication, crushing the pill into a spoonful of wet food the way the instructions recommended. She ate it without hesitation, licked the bowl clean, and returned to her bed by the window. An hour later, she finally closed her eyes. I sat across from her in the dimming light and felt something crack open in my chest. Not relief, something heavier. Because this dog, this 4-year-old shepherd mix who should have been bouncing off the walls with freedom, had learned that survival meant stillness. And I had no idea what had taught her that. Day 3 started the same as the others. I woke early, filled her bowls, let her out into the fenced backyard. She did her business efficiently and came right back to the door. No exploring, no sniffing, no joy. I was making coffee when my phone rang. Unknown number, local area code. I almost didn't answer. Hello. The voice on the other end was male. Calm. Too calm. Is this Martin's? Yeah. Who's this? My name's Richard Dorn. I'm calling about the dog you picked up from the shelter 3 days ago. My hand tightened around the phone. Bella? That's not her name, he said simply. Her registered name is Duchess Bellatrix of Dorn Kennels. And she's my property. The room tilted. Your property? She was at a shelter. I adopted her legally. You adopted stolen property. His voice didn't rise, didn't waver. And if you don't return her within 72 hours, I'll be pursuing legal action for theft, breach of contract, and damages. Do you understand? I looked across the room. Bella was standing now, staring at me, ears flat, body low, like she could hear him through the phone. I'll call you back, I said, and hung up. My hands were shaking. Bella didn't move. And for the first time since I brought her home, I realized freedom hadn't been offered to her at all. It had been stolen from someone who thought she was his to keep. I didn't call Richard Dorn back. Not that day. Not the next. Instead, I watched Bella the way you watch storm clouds rolling in, waiting for something to break, hoping it won't. She moved through my house like a guest who knew she wouldn't be staying long. Polite, careful, never knocking anything over, never jumping on furniture, never barking at sounds that would send most dogs into a frenzy. Delivery trucks, sirens, the neighbor's cat yowling at 3 in the morning. Bella heard everything, reacted to nothing. At 51, I'd learned to trust my instincts about people. The handshake that lingers too long, the smile that doesn't reach the eyes, the story that's too polished to be true. You spend enough years working with contractors, clients, and liars, and you develop a radar for when something's off. Bella had that same radar. I noticed it first on the 4th morning. I was making breakfast, eggs, toast, nothing special when I dropped a pan. The clang echoed through the kitchen like a gunshot. Most dogs would have been startled, jumped, maybe barked. Bella didn't flinch. She turned her head slowly, assessed the situation, and went back to watching the window. That's not training. That's conditioning. Training teaches a dog to sit, stay, come when called. Conditioning teaches a dog that panic is expensive. Those reactions get punished. That stillness is survival. I crouched down beside her, studying her face. Her eyes tracked me without her head moving, calculating, measuring distance, tone, intent. She wasn't afraid of me. She was reading to me. "What did they do to you?" I whispered. Her ear flicked. That was all. That afternoon, I pulled out the medical file the shelter had given me. It was thinner than I expected. Just 4 pages tucked into a Ziploc bag, some of the ink smudged from handling. Most of it was standard. Vaccinations up to date. Spade. Weight, 53 pounds. Estimated age, 4 years. Breed, Shepherd mix. But halfway down the second page, something caught my eye. Current medications. Trazodone 100 milligrams. 1 tablet daily for anxiety management. Gabapentin 300 milligrams, as needed for stress response. I read it twice. These weren't short-term prescriptions. The dates showed she'd been on trazodone for at least 18 months. Gabapentin even longer. That's not a dog with separation anxiety or fear of thunderstorms. That's a dog being chemically managed for something chronic. I kept reading. Under behavioral notes, there was a single line. Calm, non-reactive, previously owned. Surrendered due to lifestyle change. Previously owned. Not abandoned. Not a stray. Not seized by animal control. Surrendered. That word sat heavy in my chest. People surrender dogs when they move, when they have a baby, when they can't afford vet bills. But people don't surrender dogs that are on expensive anxiety medication unless something else is happening. I looked at Bella, still lying by the window, and a thought crept in that I didn't want to entertain. What if she hadn't surrendered at all? What if she was released? The next morning, I called the shelter. Jenna answered on the 3rd ring, her voice as bright as it had been the day I picked Bella up. "Hi, this is Martinez. I adopted Bella last week. Kennel 17. "Oh, yes. How's she doing?" "She's adjusting," I said carefully. "I had a question about her file. It says she was previously owned. Do you have any information about her last home?" There was a pause. Too long. Let me check." I heard papers shuffling. A muffled conversation in the background. Then Jenna came back, her tone slightly different. Guarded. "It looks like she came in as the owner surrendered. We don't have contact information on file for the previous owner." "You don't have any information?" "No, sorry. That's not uncommon." It was common. I knew that. But something about the way she said it felt rehearsed. "What about the anxiety medication?" I pressed. "Was she on that when she came in?" Another pause. She was, yes. The vet continued the prescription because it seemed to be helping her. Helping her with what? I'm not sure. It just says, anxiety management, in her chart. I thanked her and hung up. Bella was watching me from across the room, head resting on her paws, eyes steady and unblinking. I'd worked in construction for 30 years. I knew what it looked like when someone built a wall to hide something behind it. The shelter's file wasn't incomplete. It was scrubbed. That night, I sat on the floor beside Bella's bed and ran my hand along her back. She didn't pull away, didn't lean in, just let me touch her. The way you let a stranger hold a door open. Polite, but not trusting. "You're not broken," I told her quietly. "You're just careful." Her tail thumped once. Soft, deliberate. It was the first time she'd done that. And I realized something that made my stomach turn. Bella wasn't waiting to trust me. She was waiting to see if I'd figure out why she couldn't. Because somewhere in the 18 months of medication, the too clean coat, the practiced obedience, there was a story no one had written down. And Richard Dorn's phone call wasn't a threat. It was a warning. I didn't call Richard Dorn back that day, or the next. Instead, I did what I'd planned to do from the beginning. I gave Bella routine. Because if there's one thing I learned raising dogs in my younger years, it's that animals don't heal from chaos. They heal from predictability. Every morning at 6:30, I filled her raised stainless steel bowls, premium senior formula mixed with warm water to make it easier on her stomach. She ate slowly, methodically, chewing each bite like she'd been taught to ration. Not the behavior of a starving dog. The behavior of a controlled one. After breakfast, medication. The prescription anxiety pills came first, tucked into a small piece of cheese. Then the calming supplements, the ones with L-theanine and chamomile, mixed into a spoonful of plain yogurt. She took them without resistance, like she'd done this 1,000 times before. Then we'd sit. Not walk. Not play. Just sit. I'd settle into the armchair near the window, and Bella would lie on her orthopedic bed 3 feet away, watching me. Not nervously, not affectionately, just monitoring, like she was waiting for me to prove something. It took 4 days before she rested her chin on her paws. It took 6 before she stopped watching the door every time the house settled. The first real moment of connection came on a Tuesday evening. I was reading some old Western I'd picked up at a thrift store when I heard it. A low whine, barely audible. I looked up, and Bella was standing near the hallway, staring at the darkened corridor leading to the bedroom. "What's wrong, girl?" She didn't move, just whined again, softer this time. I stood slowly, walked toward her, and that's when I heard it too. The furnace kicking on. A mechanical hum and a low whoosh of air through the vents. Normal house sounds. Sounds I didn't even notice anymore. But Bella noticed. She backed up 2 steps, ears flat, body tense. "It's okay," I said quietly, kneeling beside her. "It's just the heater. It's supposed to do that." I reached out slowly, and for the first time, she let me touch her without purpose. Not to clip a leash, not to give medication, just to comfort. My hand rested on her back, and I felt the tremor beneath her fur. A vibration so faint I might have missed it if I hadn't been paying attention. She wasn't afraid of the sound. She was conditioned to react to it. I stayed there with her until the furnace cycled off, until her breathing slowed, until she walked back to her bed and lay down, this time facing me instead of the door. It wasn't trusted yet, but it was something. The nights were harder. Bella slept in the crate beside my bed, door open, blanket draped over the top for security. But sleep for her was fractured. She'd doze for an hour, then wake suddenly, head up, ears swiveling, listening for something I couldn't hear. On the 8th night, I woke to find her standing in the doorway of my bedroom, silhouetted in the dim glow of the hallway night light. "You okay, Bella?" She didn't come closer, didn't retreat, just stood there, staring at me like she was checking to make sure I was still real, still there. "Come here," I said, patting the floor beside the bed. She hesitated. 10 long seconds. Then she walked forward slowly and lay down on the rug beside me. Not in her crate, not on her designated bed, but close. Close enough that I could hear her breathing even out. Close enough that when my hand dropped over the edge of the mattress, my fingers brushed the top of her head. She didn't pull away. By the end of the 2nd week, we'd found a rhythm. Morning medication, measured meals, short walks where she stayed close, never pulling, never wandering. Afternoons spent in the living room, me reading or watching old movies, her resting on the orthopedic bed, occasionally lifting her head to check on me. She'd started taking treats from my hand, started following me from room to room instead of staying planted in one spot. I started, almost imperceptibly, to relax. But there were things she wouldn't do. She wouldn't go into the backyard unless I went with her. She wouldn't eat until I sat down nearby. She wouldn't sleep until I turned off the lights and settled into bed first. These weren't the behaviors of a neglected dog finding freedom. These were the behaviors of a dog who'd been micromanaged, monitored, controlled. One evening, as I refilled her water bowl, I pulled out the Ziploc bag of medical records the shelter had given me. I'd glanced at them before but hadn't really read them. Now, I spread them across the kitchen table under the overhead light. Vaccination records. Clean. Spay confirmation. Noted. Medication history. Extensive. Anti-anxiety. Prescribed continuously for 18 months. Hormone supplements. Administered biannually. Pain management. As needed for joint inflammation. I stared at that last line. Joint inflammation. She was 4 years old. I looked across the room at Bella, resting peacefully on her bed, her body finally still. And I realized something that made my throat tighten. She hadn't been neglected. She'd been used. And whoever Richard Dorn was, he didn't want her back because he missed her. He wanted her back because she knew too much. I didn't call him back. Instead, I called the shelter. The phone rang 6 times before someone picked up. Not Jenna. Someone older. Male. Tired. Riverside Shelter. This is Tom. Tom, this is Martinez. I adopted a dog 3 days ago. Bella. Kennel 17. I just got a call from someone claiming she's his property and threatening to sue me. Silence. Not the kind of silence that means confusion. The kind that means, oh no, not this again. What did he say his name was? Tom asked carefully. Richard Dorn. Said something about Dorn Kennels and that Bella's registered name is Duchess Bellatrix. Yeah. Tom exhaled slowly. Look, Martin. I'm gonna be straight with you. That dog was legally surrendered to us. We have the paperwork. He signed it himself. Then why is he calling me? Because he does this. Tom's voice dropped. He surrenders dogs when they stop being profitable, then tries to intimidate adopters into returning them so he can resell or rebreed. It's a shakedown. My stomach turned. And you still adopted her out? We adopted her out because she's ours now, legally. And you adopted her legally from us. He has no claim. But that won't stop him from trying. I looked across the room. Bella was still standing, still watching me, her body language tight and alert. What do I do? Don't engage. Don't answer his calls. And if he contacts you again, document everything. We'll back you up if it goes further, but Martin's. He paused. He's not going to stop just because we tell him to. Why not? Because dogs like Bella know too much. The line went dead. I sat on the couch, phone still in my hand, trying to process what I just heard. The room felt smaller. The air is heavier. Bella walked slowly toward me and sat at my feet. Her eyes locked on mine with an intensity one hadn't seen before. She wasn't asking for comfort. She was asking me what I was going to do. My phone buzzed. Another unknown number. I stared at the screen, let it ring twice, 3 times, then answered. Martin's. Richard Dorn's voice was smoother this time, almost friendly. I assume you've had time to think. I called the shelter. They said you surrendered her. I released her from my program, yes, temporarily, due to a medical issue that has since been resolved. The shelter was supposed to hold her for me, not adopt her out to a stranger. That's not what they told me. Then they lied. His tone sharpened just slightly. Look, I don't want this to get ugly. You seem like a decent person. But that dog represents 4 years of investment, training, veterinary care, bloodline documentation. She's worth $12,000, conservatively. I'm willing to let this go if you return her by the end of the week. Otherwise, I'll have no choice but to pursue legal remedies. Legal remedies, I repeated slowly. A lawsuit, Martins, for theft of property, breach of implied contract, and emotional distress. I'll also be filing a complaint against the shelter for improper adoption procedures. You'll be named as a co-defendant. My jaw tightened. She's not property. In the eyes of the law, she absolutely is. And I have the registration papers to prove it. Bella's ears flattened. A low sound rumbled in her chest. Not a growl, but close. She was reacting to my tone, to the tension in the air, to something she recognized. I'm not giving her back, I said. The pause on the other end stretched long enough that I thought he'd hung up. Then I'll see you in court. The line clicked off. I sat there, heart pounding, staring at Bella. She hadn't moved. I hadn't relaxed. Her eyes stayed locked on mine, and I realized something that made my blood run cold. She'd heard this conversation before. Maybe not the words, but the tone, the threat, the moment when someone decided her fate without asking what she wanted. I reached down and rested my hand on her head. She leaned into it, just barely, the way she had that first day in the parking lot. And for the first time since I'd brought her home, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not hope, but something close. She was waiting to see if I'd fight. I pulled my hand back and opened my phone. Searched for animal rights attorney near me. Scrolled through 3 pages of results. Found one with good reviews. Sent an email with the subject line, breeder threatening lawsuit over adopted dog. Then I looked at Bella and said the only thing that mattered. You're staying. Her tail moved. Just once. A single cautious wag. And the word that lingered in the air between us wasn't lawsuit. It was worth it. She was worth fighting for. And he knew it. Okay, real talk. Pause for 1 second. We're at 847 subscribers right now. And I'm challenging you to help us hit 1,000 before this story ends. Why? Because if you're the kind of person who believes a dog's life matters more than a breeder's bank account, you're exactly who this channel is for. Smash that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my position? Also, drop your city or country. I want to see how far Bella's story is traveling. Share this with someone who loves dogs more than drama. Now, back to what happened next. I didn't sleep that night. Richard Dorn's voice played on a loop in my head. Calm, certain, threatening. Stolen property. Legal action. 72 hours. I tried calling the shelter twice after he hung up. Both times it went to voicemail. By the time the sun came up, I'd made my decision. I was going back. Bella watched me from her bed as I pulled on my jacket, her eyes tracking every movement. I crouched beside her, running my hand along her back. I'll be back soon, I said quietly. I promise. She didn't react, just kept watching, like she'd heard promises before. The shelter parking lot was nearly empty when I arrived just after 9. Inside, the fluorescent lights felt harsher than I remembered, the smell of disinfectant sharper. Jenna was at the front desk, typing something into an old desktop computer. When she saw me, her smile faltered. Martins, she said carefully. Is everything okay? Is Bella? I got a call, I interrupted, from a breeder named Richard Dorn. He says Bella's his property and he's threatening to sue me. The color drained from her face. I need to see her file, I said. The real one, not the summary you gave me. She hesitated, fingers frozen above the keyboard. I don't have access to. Then get someone who does. Her eyes darted toward the back office. After a long moment, she picked up the phone. The manager's name was David Ortiz. Late 50s, graying at the temples with the kind of tired eyes that come from seeing too much and being able to fix too little. He gestured for me to sit across from his desk. Bella's file already open in front of him. "Mr. Martinez," he began, "I want you to know that everything we did was legal." "That's not what I asked," I said. "I want to know where Bella came from." He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "She didn't surrender through normal channels. She was released to us through a veterinary intervention." "What does that mean?" "It means a vet contacted us directly, said they had a dog in their care that needed immediate placement. The owner had signed relinquishment papers. We took her in, processed her, made her available for adoption." "And you didn't think that was unusual? In this business?" He gave me a bitter smile. "No. We get dogs from vets all the time. Medical surrenders, behavioral cases, owners who can't afford treatment. It happens." I leaned forward. "Show me her medical records." "All of them." He hesitated, then slid a thick folder across the desk. I opened it slowly. The first page was a standard intake form: weight, age, breed assessment, temperament notes. The second page was a vaccination record. Current on everything. Too current. Like she'd been maintained on a schedule. Then I found the vet notes. My hands stopped turning pages. Patient history. Multiple cesarean sections over a 24-month period. Shows signs of chronic stress and hormonal imbalance. Prescribed fluoxetine 20 milligrams daily for anxiety management. The owner advised against further breeding. Owner non-compliant. Relinquishment recommended. I read it again, then a third time. "She was bred," I said quietly. "Over and over." David nodded. "We suspected as much. But the relinquishment was legal. The vet documented everything. We couldn't. She wasn't relinquished. I cut him off. She was disposed of. Used up and thrown away." The room went silent. I flipped through more pages. There were medication logs going back months. Fluoxetine, trazodone, gabapentin. Drugs to keep her calm. Compliant. Manageable. Not because she was aggressive. Because she was breaking down. One note, dated 3 weeks before her intake, stopped me cold. Patient unresponsive to breeding stimulation. Recommendation: retire from program. Retire. Like she was a machine that had outlived its warranty. I looked up at David. "And Dorn? You knew who he was." "We knew he was a breeder," David admitted. "Registered. Licensed. Technically legal. But when the vet brought Bella in, they made it clear. If we contacted him, the dog wouldn't survive the week." My jaw tightened. "So you hid her." "We protected her," he corrected. "We changed her name in the system, kept her intake paperwork minimal, moved her through adoption as fast as we could. We were trying to do the right thing." "And when he found out?" David's face darkened. "He's threatened to sue us too. Says we facilitated theft of valuable breeding stock. He wants her back, Martinez. And he's got lawyers." I closed the file slowly, my hands steadier than I expected. "We didn't raise dogs this way," I said quietly. "When I was young, dogs had value because they were loyal, because they worked, because they were ours. Not because someone could profit off their pain." David said nothing. I stood, tucking the folder under my arm. "I'm keeping this. And I'm keeping Bella. Martin's, if he takes this to court." "Let him," I said. "Because if this file says what I think it says, he won't want a judge to see it." I walked out of that office with something I didn't have before. Not just answers. Proof. And the growing understanding that Bella hadn't been rescued from neglect. She'd been rescued from industry. Richard Dorn didn't call again. He sent a lawyer instead. The letter arrived on a Wednesday morning, delivered by certified mail, the kind that requires a signature. Thick envelope. Law firm letterhead embossed in gold. Inside, for pages of legal language that all said the same thing. Return the dog, pay damages, or face a lawsuit that would cost me more than I'd ever recover. Estimated value of Duchess Bellatrix of Dorn Kennels, $12,000. Estimated legal fees if I refuse to comply, $30,000 and climbing. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the letter, while Bella lay on her orthopedic bed by the window. She'd stopped watching the door. Now she watched me. "We're not giving up," I said aloud. Her tail thumped once against the bed. The first time she'd wagged it in 2 weeks. I called a legal aid clinic that afternoon. The woman on the phone listened patiently while I explained everything: the adoption, the threats, the medical records, the breeder's claim of ownership. "Do you have proof she was legally surrendered to the shelter?" she asked. "They said she was." "That's not the same as proof, Mr. Martinez." She referred me to a lawyer who worked pro bono for animal welfare cases. His name was David Espinoza. We met the next day at a coffee shop downtown, and I brought every document I had: the adoption paperwork, Bella's vet records, the breeder's letter, even the Ziploc bag of medication the shelter had given me. David read through everything twice. "He's posturing," David said finally, "trying to scare you into compliance before anyone asks questions he doesn't want to answer." Questions like what? Like why a $12,000 breeding dog ended up in a municipal shelter with anxiety medication and no microchip registered in his name. That night, David made a call to a local reporter he knew, someone who covered animal welfare issues for the regional paper. Not a big story yet, just an inquiry. A few questions sent to Dorn Kennel's business email. By Friday, those questions were public. The article was small, page 6, barely 300 words. But it asked the right things. Local breeders claim ownership of shelter dogs. But why was she there in the first place? Within hours, Dorn Kennel's Facebook page was flooded with comments. People asking about breeding practices. People sharing stories of puppies they'd bought that came with anxiety issues. People wondered how many other dogs had been quietly discarded when they stopped being profitable. Richard Dorn's lawyer sent another letter. This one was shorter, angrier. It accused me of defamation, harassment, and conspiracy to damage his client's reputation. But the threats felt hollow now, because Bella had started sleeping through the night. She didn't need her calming medication anymore. I'd tapered it down over the past week under the vet's supervision, and she'd adjusted without regression. She ate her meals with interest now. She greeted me at the door when I came home. She'd even started playing gentle, cautious play, but play nonetheless, with a rope toy I'd bought her. And every evening, when I sat on the couch to review documents or return phone calls, Bella would leave her bed by the window, walk across the room, and lie down at my feet. Not because she was afraid, because she'd chosen to. David called that Sunday with an update. The shelter found the original intake paperwork, he said. Bella was surrendered by a veterinary clinic after they treated her for exhaustion and malnutrition. Dorn signed the release himself. He what? He gave her up, legally, in writing. And now he wants her back because she's gaining attention he can't control. I looked down at Bella, asleep at my feet, her breathing slow and steady. He's not getting her back, I said. No, David agreed. He's not. And for the first time since this started, I believed it. He arrived on a Thursday morning. No warning, no call ahead. Just a silver SUV pulling into my driveway at 9:30, and a man in a pressed polo shirt stepping out like he owned the gravel beneath his boots. Richard Dorn looked exactly like his voice sounded. Controlled, expensive, certain. I was in the front yard with Bella, letting her sit in the November sun while I raked leaves. She'd been calmer over the past 2 weeks. Still cautious, still watchful, but calmer. The medication had been reduced. The tremors had stopped. She'd even wagged her tail once when I came home from the store. Once. The moment his car door shut, Bella's ears went flat. "Martins," Dorn called, walking toward me with his hand extended like we were meeting for business. I didn't take it. "You need to leave," I said evenly. "I'm not here to argue." His tone was measured, reasonable, the kind of calm that makes you feel unreasonable for resisting. "I'm here to collect what's mine and avoid further complications. She's not yours. Legally, she is. I have her pedigree, her registration papers, and proof of ownership dating back 4 years. The shelter had no right to adopt her out. You know that now." I did know. The shelter had shown me the internal emails, the quiet transfer, the medical notes they'd tried to bury. Bella hadn't surrendered. She'd been released, quietly, carefully, after the vet had flagged her file. But knowing the paperwork didn't change what I'd seen in her eyes. "She's not going with you," I said. Dorn's expression didn't shift. "Then we'll let the courts decide." "Go ahead." That's when Bella moved. Not toward him. Not away from him. She stood slowly, walked 3 deliberate steps, and pressed her body against the back of my legs. Not hiding. Not cowering. Just positioning herself. Claiming her side. Dorn saw it. I saw it. And so did Mrs. Alvarez from next door, standing on her porch with her phone out. And Jim from across the street, pausing mid-lawn mower. And the mail carrier, slowing her truck at the curb. Witnesses, silent, watching. Dorn's jaw tightened. She's been trained to bond quickly. It's part of her breeding line. Don't mistake behavior for loyalty. "She's not performing," I said quietly. "She's choosing." His eyes flicked down to Bella, and for the first time, something cracked in his composure. Not anger, something colder. Irritation. "I spent 4 years developing her lineage," he said, voice lowering. 4 years of investment, veterinary care, proper diet, conditioning. "She's worth more than you can imagine." Worth. The word tasted bitter. "You're talking about a dog like she's equipment." "She is a resource," Dorn said simply. "That's how breeding works. You invest, you maintain, you produce results. When they stop producing, you retire them responsibly." "Responsibly," I repeated. "Is that what you call dumping her at a shelter after her body gave out?" His face hardened. "I placed her in a reputable facility after she could no longer fulfill her purpose. That's more than most breeders would do." Bella pressed harder against my legs. Dorn looked at her again, and this time I saw it. The way he looked at her, the same way someone looks at a car that won't start. Not with cruelty. With disappointment. "Last chance," he said. "Return her voluntarily, or I'll file the lawsuit tomorrow." I crouched down slowly, resting my hand on Bella's head. She leaned into it. Steady. Certain. I looked up at Dorn. "File it." He stared at me for a long moment. Then at Bella. Then at Mrs. Alvarez, still recording. At Jim, arms crossed, watching. At the mail carrier, window down, waiting. Dorn turned without another word, climbed into his SUV, and left. Bella didn't watch him go. She turned her head and looked at me instead. And for the first time since I brought her home, her tail wagged. Not once. Twice. If you're still watching, that means you care, and honestly, that's rare these days. We're 153 subscribers away from 1,000, and every single one of you watching right now can change that. Hit subscribe if you believe standing up for what's right is more important than staying quiet. Like this video if you'd protect Bella too. And comment below where you're tuning in from. I'm building a community of people who actually give a damn about animals. Share this story. It matters. Now let's finish this. The meeting happened in a conference room at the County Animal Services Building, not a courtroom. Richard Dorn arrived with a lawyer. I arrived with a folder. The shelter director, Margaret, sat across from us, flanked by the county attorney and a veterinarian I'd never met before. The air smelled like stale coffee and bureaucracy. Dorn's lawyer laid out his case first: breeding contracts, pedigree papers, kennel registration documents. Everything is laminated. Everything official looking. Duchess Bellatrix was part of a registered breeding program, the lawyer said, sliding papers across the table. My client has invested thousands in her lineage. The shelter had no legal right to adopt her out. Margaret didn't flinch. We had every right, she said quietly, and opened her own folder. What came out wasn't laminated. It was medical records, incident reports, veterinary notes spanning 3 years. She laid them out one by one, and I watched Dorn's face change with each page. Bella was surrendered to us by Clearview Veterinary Clinic after your staff brought her in for the 4th time in 18 months, Margaret said. Each visit showed signs of overbreeding, malnutrition masked by supplements, chronic stress. The vet filed a welfare concern report with animal control. The county attorney leaned forward. Mr. Dorn, you were notified twice that your breeding operation was under investigation. You didn't respond. When officers visited your property, Bella wasn't on the premises. You'd already moved her. I relocated her to a partner facility for specialized care, Dorn said, but his voice had lost its edge. You dumped her at a rural shelter 2 counties over, Margaret corrected, under a false name. No medical history, no microchip registration update. You abandoned her the moment she stopped producing viable litters. The vet spoke next, her tone clinical but damning. Bella's uterine scarring is consistent with back-to-back pregnancies over multiple years. Her anxiety medication wasn't for behavioral issues. It was to keep her compliant during high-stress breeding cycles. She was a production asset, Mr. Dorn. Not a dog. Silence filled the room. Dorn's lawyer shuffled his papers. My client maintains that. Your client is done, the county attorney interrupted. We have documentation, veterinary testimony, and witness statements from 3 separate shelters. If Mr. Dorn pursues this lawsuit, we'll countersue for animal cruelty, fraud, and filing a false claim. And we'll win. Dorn stood slowly. His lawyer touched his arm, but he shook it off. She was a champion bloodline, he said quietly, looking at me for the first time. Do you have any idea what she was worth? I met his eyes. No, I said, but I know what she's worth now. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he turned and walked out. His lawyer followed, briefcase in hand, papers still scattered on the table. Margaret exhaled slowly. It's over, she said. I nodded, but I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired, because Bella hadn't been saved by justice. She'd been saved because someone finally cared enough to look at the paperwork everyone else had ignored. Patience hadn't just outlasted power. It had exposed it. The house was quiet when we got home. No cameras, no reporters, no lawyers waiting on the porch. Just the sound of gravel under tires and the soft click of Bella's nails on the driveway as I opened her crate door. She stepped out slowly, lifted her head toward the front door, and walked. Not hesitant, not cautious. She walked like she knew where she was going. Inside, the afternoon light came through the living room window the way it always did, golden, warm, slanting across the floor in long beams. Bella moved straight to her orthopedic bed by the window, circled once, and lay down. But this time she didn't face the door. She faced the window. I stood there watching her for a long moment, my coat still on, keys still in my hand. This was the same dog who 3 months ago wouldn't sleep. who sat upright in her crate all night, staring at shadows, who flinched at raised voices and scanned every room like she was calculating escape routes. Now she was resting her chin on the edge of the bed, eyes half closed, breathing steady, not guarding, not waiting, just being. I hung my coat on the hook by the door and walked to the kitchen. Her stainless steel feeding bowls were right where they'd always been, one with fresh water, one waiting for dinner. I measured out her food, added a little warm water to soften it, and set it down. Bella lifted her head, rose from the bed, and came to eat. No hesitation, no checking the room first, just trust. It had taken 4 months to get here. 4 months of the same routine every single day. Same feeding times, same walk route, same bedtime. And somewhere in all that repetition, Bella had stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. She'd started believing this was real. Dr. Brennan had called last week with good news. Bella's anxiety medication could be reduced. Not eliminated, not yet, but reduced. Her cortisol levels were down. Her weight was stable. The tremors in her legs had stopped. Whatever you're doing, Dr. Brennan had said, keep doing it. What I was doing wasn't complicated. I woke up at the same time every morning, fed her at the same time. I walked the same route, let her out into the backyard at the same intervals, gave her the same goodnight routine, bed check, water refill, lights low. No drama, no surprises, no variables she couldn't predict, just consistency. That evening, after Bella finished eating, she returned to her bed and lay down facing the window again. I sat on the couch across from her with a cup of coffee going cold in my hands. People had called me a hero, the shelter, the media, strangers online who'd followed the story. They said I saved her. But sitting there, watching Bella finally rest the way dogs are supposed to rest, I realized they had it wrong. I didn't save Bella. I protected her. There's a difference. Saving implies rescue, dramatic, urgent, singular. One moment that changes everything. But protection, that's daily, quiet, unglamorous. Just showing up at the same time every morning even when you're tired. It's refilling the water bowl before it's empty. It's keeping your voice steady when the world gets loud. It's proving over and over and over that you're not going anywhere. Bella shifted on her bed, stretched her front legs, and sighed. One of those deep, full-body sighs that dogs only do when they feel safe. I looked at her and thought about all the things I'd imagined adoption would be. The joy, the gratitude, the instant bond. None of that happened. What happened instead was harder, slower, more honest. What happened was love. Not the kind you see in movies. Not the kind that makes you cry in the parking lot. The kind that shows up every day and does the work. The kind that says, I'm still here, and I'm not leaving. Bella closed her eyes. And for the first time since I brought her home, I did too. So that's how it ended. Not with a dramatic rescue, but with quiet, everyday love. If the story hit you the way it hit me, do 3 things. First, subscribe. We're this close to 1,000 and I can't do it without you. Second, like this video so more people see what happens when you choose responsibility over ego. And third, comment below where you're watching from and tell me, would you have kept Bella or given her back? Share this with someone who needs to hear that protecting the vulnerable isn't optional. It's everything. Thanks for being here. Now go hug your dog.